On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is TalkTV.
Tonight on Piers Morgan Uncensored, Israel pounds Gaza as Hamas terrorists threaten more violence. 1,300 are now feared dead already. Tonight, Hamas says it will begin executing hostages. The Israeli government has ordered a complete siege of Gaza, cutting off food, fuel and power. We'll be live on the ground and hear from people on both sides of this divide. More than 10 British citizens are feared dead or missing. I talked to a British woman whose family survived a terrifying 9-hour siege inside their burning home. Also tonight, Beckham is back with a smash hit documentary on Netflix. Is this the revival of Brand Beckham, or is it all just a load of old golden balls? We'll debate that.
Live from the News Building in London, this is Piers Morgan Uncensored.
Well, good evening from London. Welcome to Piers Morgan Uncensored. The stories emerging from Israel are harrowing and frankly disgusting. They represent the very worst of humanity. This can even be described as human at all. More than 900 Israelis have been murdered since Hamas attacked Israel on Saturday. They include more than 260 people, many young people, massacred at a music festival. There were people with all their lives ahead of them, their dreams intact, now dead or traumatized forever. Babies and grandparents have been snatched as hostages by gunmen, prowling door to door. Women have been raped next to the corpses of their friends. This is medieval barbarism. We're witnessing one of the worst atrocities in modern times, and we should be absolutely clear about this. These are acts of unspeakable evil committed by terrorists. There is no justification, no explanation, no context, no whataboutery. This is terrorism. As is usually the case with Israel, opportunists have turned quickly to try to say, well, OK, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about the suffering of the Palestinians at Israel's hands? What about the appalling conditions in Gaza? And yes, there are, of course, significant broader issues in Israel, and they're subject to ongoing, intensely emotive debate. It's a debate I've always tried to be fair-minded about. But whataboutery is not an acceptable response to terrorism. The people out waving the Palestinian flag today in London, New York and Manchester, they've got this wrong if they think this is a time to celebrate.
Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free. Free, free Palestine. From the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free.
Well, some of those people may well have the right intentions, however misguided, but to parade like that today looks like a celebration of mass murder. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has undeniably dragged his country into chaos over his attempts to politicise the judiciary. Questions will now be asked about whether Hamas has exploited that chaos in pulling off an attack on a country with one of the most advanced intelligence operations in the world. How did this happen? The Israelis are now speaking in chilling terms about what comes next by way of retribution, warning of enormous force that will change the region forever.
The Israeli Defense Forces will immediately use all its strength to destroy Hamas's capabilities. We will destroy them and take mighty vengeance for this black day that they have forced on the state of Israel and its citizens.
Israel has every right to defend itself from this kind of massacre, and Israelis rightly expect their country to respond with force. The world is watching in the expectation, the hope perhaps, that its response will be proportionate, although it's hard to see what proportion is in this scenario. It all, frankly, adds up to another nightmare in this region. And a lot of innocent people are going to get killed over the next few weeks and months. Tonight, Hamas says it will begin executing hostages unless Israel stops hitting Gaza. Well, Israel will not stop hitting Gaza. The Israeli government has also ordered a complete siege of Gaza, cutting off food, fuel and power. More than 500 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since retaliation began. That death toll will rise and rise. More Israelis will lose their lives too. Many, many innocent people are going to die here. Peace between Israel and Palestine now looks impossible, certainly as far away as it's ever been. Perhaps the only cause for hope anywhere in this mess is that people used to say that about Northern Ireland too, until eventually, finally, after so much bloodshed, peace was forged. Well, first tonight, a British-Israeli family were trapped for 9 hours with a 10-year-old baby as Hamas terrorists burnt down their house and ransacked their town close to the Gaza border. Deborah Mintz, originally from Romford in Essex, hid in the tiny room with her grandson Kai and his parents Amy and Uriel Laban. I'm pleased to say they're all safe and well now, and that all of them now join me live. Well, welcome to all of you. Thank you so much. I can't even imagine what you've been through. So let me say that off the top of this interview. Deborah, let me start with you. For you, this must have been like a nightmare happening in real time.
Yeah. Even as I look back, I find it very hard to believe that I was actually there. Yeah, it's something in my wildest dreams I never thought would happen to me.
Deborah, tell the audience, as best you can remember, exactly what did happen.
First of all, I want to apologise that we're coughing because of smoke inhalation. So that's the first thing I want to say. We were woken up about 6:30, and I'm not 100% on timing. It was about 6:30. There was a red siren alert. My daughter and her husband and the baby were sleeping in the secure room, a bunker, I suppose you'd call it, with a steel door. And she screamed at me, "Mum, come, there's a siren." So I picked myself up out of bed. My little dog wouldn't come with me. He was afraid. We picked up the big dog and off I went into the room. We closed the door. Now this room is to protect from rockets. It's a concrete reinforced room with a steel door and a steel window. After about an hour, we heard gunfire outside, and we realized it took us time, but eventually we realized that we were under attack. My daughter has security cameras in her tiny little house, and she looks on her phone and she screamed at me, Mum, the terrorists are in the house, they've entered the house. And she and her husband, with all their might, kept the handle of the steel door upright. So this isn't a door that locks from inside and that's it. It's a door to protect you from rockets, not from invaders and intruders. And they couldn't get us out. They were shooting at the door. So they set fire to the house. They switched off the electricity, so we lost camera vision. And the smoke started coming under the steel door into the little, very small room where we were. Because there was no electricity, there was no air, and the window was closed. And from that point, we knew, yeah, that's their house. We knew we were not going to survive. But from the grace of God, I don't know how. Every time we believed that the terrorists were not around the house, that they'd gone to another house, we opened the window, we picked the baby up, we put the baby on the windowsill, we all got some fresh air, heard the terrorists, threw the baby on the bed, closed the steel window, held the door, and we did this for about 6 hours. The room was completely filled with smoke, thick black soot. During this time, well, very early when they first started the fire, I think the worst thing was we heard my little dog scream as she burned to death. And I think I pretty much gave up after that. But for the sake of the baby, you try.
Yeah.
And then when we heard, well, both the kids were on the phone, once Uriel to his brother, Amy to the fire brigade, but they couldn't get to us. They just couldn't get through the roads. And 6 hours in smoke, pretty much 9 hours from when it started, we heard Hebrew outside and gunfire and more Hebrew. And then somebody called out, Uriel, and we said, we're here. And the army came, secured the house and got us out through the window. Obviously the baby first. We were taken to an underground shelter where other people soon followed, but we heard horrible stories of other people being shot and disappearing. And eventually, because still the ambulances couldn't get in and we'd all been in a fire, we were taken by the army to the hospital, which was well over an hour away. And my daughter and her husband and baby Kai were released today, only today. And today is our reunion. I was released on Saturday night. They decided I was okay.
It's Deborah. Let me just say, Deborah, you tell that story. It's making my spine chill listening to what you've just said, and I'm just so glad that all of you are still alive. Let me come to you, Amy. I mean, you must feel unbelievably fortunate to still be alive, given what you now know was happening all over the place to other people.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, don't know how he survived. How Kai, a 10-day-old baby, survived. But I guess it's, you find the strength to just protect your family, protect yourself. And we just did what we our instincts told us to do. My husband just stood by the window, and every time he could, he opened it. And we, as my mother said, we put the baby on the window ledge and tried to give him as much fresh air as possible. I mean, he was coughing us up just black spit and soot. And I mean, after being so many hours in smoke, I mean, we literally can't really see you or anything on the video because our eyes are burnt. Hopefully we'll get better. As the doctor said, it should get easier. Breathing troubles, loads of medications. But we survived. And
You
so
did.
many
I mean,
people.
it's miraculous that you've survived, and particularly with this tiny baby. Uriel, let me ask you, when this was going on, when you realised afterwards the scale of what had been happening, what is your response to this?
Actually, I can't believe that we were caught in this situation. I hope that the people responsible will give some answers, because I grew up in this area since I was 10 years old. We were used to, I mean, it's awful to say, but I'm used to rockets, to the sirens, to running to the bomb shelter from time to time, because after all these years, it became the reality where I live. But what happened to us this Saturday was in a whole other scale. And honestly, I didn't ever believe that we will go through something like this. It was something else. Never was something like that. I think since Israel's state was founded.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, this is the worst slaughter of predominantly Jewish people since the Holocaust. I mean, there's no other way to describe this. Nearly 900 people or more now, apparently, were killed in this, and it's ongoing. Do you fear now, let me ask you, Amy, this, do you fear that this is now going to be a raging war for some time to come? And what will you do as a family?
Well, I honestly don't know how to answer that. I mean, I hope we'll get through this. I hope it won't get any worse. We just are trying now to figure out what's next for us, and where we're going to live for, the next weeks, months, year. We literally just lost everything. I mean, I'm glad to say my dog managed to escape the safe room because we weren't allowed to take her with us. She somehow managed to escape and survive, and she was found and brought to us. So I am happy about that.
My dog, not so lucky.
No, I'm so sad. What was your dog's name, Deborah?
Mickey. He had big ears like Mickey Mouse.
And what was Mickey's breed?
sort of like a little miniature Doberman pincher that barked a lot and slept by my feet. Here he is.
Yeah, that's it.
That's my Mickey.
I'm so sorry about Mickey. I'm so sorry about everything that's happened to you. I just want to say to all three of you, thank you for taking the time and trouble to speak to me in such open and graphic manner. I think you've really brought it home to people what it must have been like. Utterly terrifying. I'm so glad you're all still alive. I'm glad that little Kai's okay and you've had the treatment you need. And I wish you all the very best in rebuilding your lives because, like you say, everything's gone up, right? You have nothing. But I wish you all the very best and thank you for joining me.
Just mention something, please.
Yes.
That there is a GoFundMe set up to help Amy and Uriel rebuild lives. I don't know how I'm supposed to.
Well, don't worry. I'll tell you what I'll do, Deborah. I will tweet that, and I've got over 8 million Twitter followers, so I'll make sure that we tweet that out, and so people can try and help you. Okay.
Your producer, thank you very, very much for having us.
Okay. Thank you all very much. I wish you all the very best, and thank you again for joining me.
Thank you.
Quite extraordinary account there from people who are just very lucky to be alive. Uncensored next, I'll talk to two people on opposite sides of this Israel-Palestine divide. Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored for more on the situation on the ground. I'm joined now from the Israel-Gaza border by Fox News correspondent Trey Yinks. Well, Trey, I've been following your reporting all day. First of all, astounding journalism you're doing there under extremely difficult conditions. So thank you once again. You are one of the best in the world at this. But tell me, with all your experience of everything you've seen, what do you make of this last 48 hours and where's it all going to go?
Piers, thank you. I've covered a lot of conflicts all around the world and many conflicts between Israel and Gaza. This level of brutality is unprecedented. It was not a combatant-on-combatant fight. Hamas and Islamic Jihad militants entered in the early morning hours, going to a music festival and mowing down 260 people before going to communities along the Gaza border and slaughtering civilians, women and children in their homes. And we've seen the scenes of this. We were here in the hours as the invasion into southern Israel started, and we watched as mothers brought their injured children to waiting ambulances, crying and looking into the bloodied faces of their kids. And we saw as soldiers tried to resuscitate their friends unsuccessfully. We have seen just the trauma the Israeli people are experiencing and will continue to experience as a result of what happened. The latest death toll stands at more than 900 people. And in addition to that, there are dozens of hostages, captives, prisoners of war taken into the Gaza Strip. And Hamas, the group in control of Gaza, says they are keeping them in the tunnels beneath the Strip, where they store rockets and ammunition, making it even more difficult for the Israelis as they conduct more than 1,000 airstrikes against positions all throughout Gaza. Piers?
Trey, how did this happen? Israel famously has one of the best defense systems supposedly in the world, one of the best homeland security systems. The scale of this is so overwhelming. It begs the question, how on earth has this happened without the Israeli security and defense forces picking up on it?
It's a great question. This border between Israel and Gaza was touted for years by the Israelis as one of the most advanced in the world. They took our team there and showed us where they dug steel plates into the ground so that tunnels couldn't be dug into Israel. They put sensors on the tops of concrete walls with barbed wire. They have surveillance balloons and drones overhead 24/7. And the fact that Hamas and Islamic Jihad were able to infiltrate at 20 different locations along the border is stunning and terrifying. And the population here was not expecting this. There was no advance notice, no indication about a pending threat against the Israeli people. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in his address tonight to the nation and to the world, indicated there are still Hamas fighters inside Israel. We were in the town of Sderot, where we're at today, in front of the police station yesterday, reporting, and it appeared the area was clear of Hamas fighters. And as the evening hours set in, reports came in of gun battles in these streets. And so it's a very fluid and unpredictable situation. And the Israeli security forces understand there are still Palestinian militants in the southern part of this country. Piers.
And obviously we now know there's going to be ferocious retribution, revenge from Israel. Do you think that will include a ground war, land forces going in? It's always something that they've resisted doing. But is Netanyahu under such pressure now internally to do something spectacular by way of what they would see as proportionate response? So that is more likely.
Absolutely. And as you noted, in the past, even during wars with Gaza, especially, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been hesitant about sending forces in because in the past it has been very difficult and bloody for the Israelis. It is hard to occupy portions of Gaza in that manner with soldiers on every street corner and tanks and APCs because Hamas and Islamic Jihad militants know this area. They're fighting on their home turf and they have the weaponry for urban battle. But given what's happened, the slaughter of so many innocent civilians, the taking captive of women and children, grandmothers, innocent people, it leaves the Israeli Prime Minister really with no choice. It is almost certain that Israel will enter Gaza, and we have seen every indication to point to just that. Israeli tanks are staging in the fields around this town that we're in right now. There are thousands of soldiers. Today, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant indicated 300,000 reservists have been called up and hundreds of thousands remain in the wings. But there is this concern also that the southern front may not be the only front Israel is facing. Piers?
Yeah, it's a very scary situation. Trey, continue your great work, but please stay safe out there. It looks a dangerous, dangerous time to be a journalist. I've seen some extraordinary scenes today. I've seen correspondents break down in tears. I've seen others leaping to save themselves from rocket attacks. It is dangerous, but you guys do such an important job bringing the truth on the ground to the world. So thank you, and keep it up and stay safe, like I said. Well, for more, I'm joined from Ramallah in the West Bank by the Palestinian Initiative leader, Mustafa Barghouti. Mr. Barghouti, thank you for joining me. It's very hard when you look at the scale of what has happened here not to believe that this is a reprehensible terrorist attack by a bunch of medieval barbarians. When I say that, what is your response?
First of all, let me say that I'm really sorry about what happened to Deborah's family. I'm glad they are safe. If I can contribute to relieving their suffering, I am ready to do so. That's one side of the issue. But what I would like you to know, and I want the audience to know, is that what they described is exactly what happened to many Palestinian families only 3 months ago, when Israeli illegal settlers attacked their houses and burned them. These were American Palestinians from the village of Turmusaiya and Sinjil and Huwara. And they almost faced the same story. Their houses burned, their cars burned by fanatic Israeli illegal settlers. In this situation, I'm a medical doctor, as you know, and I learned that the best treatment of a patient is not only to look at the symptoms, but at the causes of the problem. And while we are talking, Gaza now is under bombardment. Gaza is taken, actually, Netanyahu is taking Gaza, the whole of Gaza, 2.2 million people as a hostage, cutting water, cutting electricity, cutting medicines, cutting food from them. The acts of collective punishment against 2.2 million Palestinians is not the right response. And this will lead to more problems. But the cause problem of what we see here is 56 years of military Israeli occupation of Palestinian land. The fact that Netanyahu blocked every possibility for a peaceful resolution of this conflict, he blocked Oslo Agreement, he fought against it, he aggravated people against Yitzhak Rabin, who was assassinated after signing Oslo Agreement. And the result is what we see today, a protracted problem. The only way out of this situation, so that no Palestinian or Israeli would suffer, is to end the Israeli illegal occupation, end the system of apartheid. And I'm not saying that by my own words, these are the words of Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, and even the Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem, end the system of apartheid that Palestinians are subjected to.
You know, I watched you, if I may just jump in there, I watched you do an interview with an old colleague of mine, Fareed Zakari at CNN, and you said many similar things, and it was a thoughtful interview, it was conducted respectfully. But you said one thing there which I wanted to challenge you on now, which is you said that in these attacks, Hamas did not target civilians. I mean, that is clearly completely untrue. They deliberately targeted civilians. Would you like to retract that statement?
No, I said that Hamas started by attacking military stations, and obviously there were attacks on civilians, which we don't accept and we don't agree with, as much as we don't agree now with what the Israeli airstrikes are doing to Gaza, striking civilian population, killing so far 700 people, and I am sure by tomorrow morning it will be 2,000 people killed.
But just to clarify, just to clarify, you do now accept they were targeting civilians, because you didn't accept that on CNN.
No, I said I didn't have the full information. I know now that some civilians were killed, and this is unacceptable.
I mean, it's not just some civilians. I mean, 260 mainly young people. Well, let me just say something. 260 mainly young people attending a peaceful music festival were machine gunned,
Yes,
were machine
this
gunned
should
to
not
their
have
death
happened.
by terrorists flying in, paragliding in with machine guns. I mean, it is hard to imagine a worse atrocity. Do you unreservedly condemn that act of terrorism?
I do not accept killing any civilian, but would you tell me that the Israeli soldiers that have killed today 140 Palestinian children and 105 Palestinian women are also terrorists?
I think that
Would you say that?
I think the Israeli people are entitled to defend themselves against what happened in the last
And
48
don't-
hours. I'm not for a moment defending everything the Israeli government's done in the last few decades. Of course, I've always, where it's been justified, criticised what they've been doing. But on this occasion, I'm not interested in playing whataboutery with you. I'm simply asking,
But would you agree with
I'm
me?
simply asking you, do you unreservedly condemn the slaughter of 260 innocent people?
I condemn any killing of any civilian, whether Palestinian or Israeli. But you have to accept that if Israel has the right to defend itself, Palestinians also must have the same right of being able to defend
But
themselves.
nobody has a right to commit. Nobody has a right to commit acts of terrorism. We'd agree with that, right?
Would you say? No, I am asking. Would you say that we also have the right to defend ourselves as human beings?
I think that there has been an oppression of the Palestinian people in Gaza for way too long. I think that there needs to be a peace settlement. We finally got there. We finally got there in Northern Ireland. But I don't understand how anybody with even half a brain would think the way to get a peace settlement is to kill nearly 1,000 mostly innocent Israelis who have nothing to do with the conflict, many of whom were attending a music festival, and get machine gunned to pieces. There is no way. There is no way that kind of attack is ever going to forge peace, is there?
Absolutely, but let's look forward. Now, at this very moment, there are hostages. There are Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. There are Israeli prisoners in Gaza. The best step forward is the following: immediate exchange of prisoners, immediate stop of all the fighting, immediate ceasefire, and opening the road for what you have said. Something like what happened in Ireland, ending the Israeli illegal occupation, allowing Palestinians finally to be free from oppression and to live side by side. I personally wouldn't mind if we could live side by side in two-state solution. But if Israel kills the two-states option, I think the only solution is that we live together in one country, in peacefully.
Can I ask you? I know you're not
in one democratic state.
Okay, I know you're not a member.
Where we both have equal rights.
Yeah.
And we both are entitled to the same equal human rights. I think that's the only way out of this situation. And we cannot say. I mean, I could list to you now so many atrocities. Let me tell you one thing from my own personal experience. Once in 1996, I was treating an injured person. I was a medical person in my white coat, and an Israeli sniper saw me and shot me twice. I still carry 35 shrapnels in my back, but I don't keep talking about that. I think the way out of this is to stop all forms of violence, to stop all forms of conflict, and to allow a peaceful resolution.
But here's the thing.
And that peaceful,
Mustafa,
here's the thing. Let
me just respond to that. You know, when I watched your interview at CNN, and I hear you again tonight, you sound a reasonable man who wants a reasonable solution to this, right? I'm not going to disrespect you by saying otherwise. The problem is Hamas are not reasonable people. They're not like you. They just want to kill as many Jews as they can possibly kill. They have no interest in the kind of resolution that you're talking about. And Hamas now has a stranglehold over the Gaza Strip and the Palestinian people. As long as they have that stranglehold with their concept of how this plays out, there is no chance of the settlement you're talking about. Do you accept that?
May I respond?
Yeah.
I know Hamas people. I've negotiated with them so many times. I've debated with them many times about the value and power of nonviolent resistance. And I tell you, they are ready to accept two-state solution. They are ready to accept that. What they are not ready to accept is that we Palestinians will repeat what the PLO leadership did, recognizing Israel as a state, while Israel still refuses to recognize our right as a state. You know, one of the main problems that Netanyahu created, and I think this man will be definitely put in front of many inquiries about what happened in the last 2 days or 3 days. But one of the worst things he did was to stand up in the United Nations only 2 weeks ago, carrying the map of Israel, including annexing the occupied West Bank, annexing the occupied Gaza Strip, annexing the occupied East Jerusalem, as well as the Golan Heights, which Israeli officially annexed. This map by itself drove everybody crazy. That meant that he and his government, with people like Smotrich, who doesn't hide away calling himself a fascist homophobe, they say that we should fill the West Bank with settlers and settlements so that Palestinians would lose all hopes of a state of their own.
Okay.
And then they will have one of three choices, either to immigrate or accept a life of subjugation to the Israelis or die. Such statement by the second most important minister in the Israeli government does not lead to peace. And that's
well,
what
on that point, Mr.
Yes.
Begala, I would agree with you. I think some of the more hardline right-wing headbangers, frankly, that Netanyahu's put into his cabinet are coming out with incendiary rhetoric before this, which has been deeply unhelpful. So on that, I would agree with you. I've got to leave it there, but thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
It's important to hear that side, and I appreciate it. For more now, I'm joined from Tel Aviv by the former Israeli ambassador to the UK, Mark Regev. Mark, we've talked many times over the years at varying stages of this conflict, never in the wake of such an appalling atrocity. And just to be clear, if you weren't listening earlier, but I view this as a heinous terror attack by terrorists. What is your response to what has happened? And what is the proportionate response that we should see from Israel?
So obviously it was a very, very difficult day for us that day. I mean, we keep finding bodies, but we're close now to 1,000 casualties, fatalities in Israel. They crossed the border. They entered our communities, agricultural communities, urban communities, and they just gunned people down in the streets. I mean, this has been reported widely. I don't have to repeat it. They came across the border to kill as many people as they could and kidnap, take back to Gaza people as hostages. And they took women, they took children, they took the elderly, even a Holocaust survivor. It was a terrible day for Israel, a severe blow. I don't think it gets tougher. My Prime Minister has called it Israel's 9/11. But if you think about it, Israel is, what, 9 million people? And we've lost close to 1,000 people. From a proportional point of view, if you look at, America is over 300 million people. It's a much tougher blow.
Mark, I was speaking to a Palestinian earlier, and he was making the point forcefully that there has been decades now of strikes and counter-strikes, attacks and counter-attacks. There's no completely innocent party here. I don't think this is the moment to talk about whataboutery because of the scale of this terror attack. But how does peace get forged now in light of the scale of this? I mean, it is hard to see how any peace will be achievable in the near to mid future.
So I think to answer your question fairly, I would argue, and to pick up on what you said to the previous guest, is that it has to be understood that Hamas are not just Israel's enemy. Hamas are the enemies of peace and reconciliation. And if you read their charter, they say openly, any Palestinian who negotiates with Israel is a traitor. Any Palestinian who makes a compromise with Israel is a traitor. They're against accepting Israel. They say it openly, in any borders. Hamas are the enemies of peace. What we saw in their brutal behavior, the way they treated the civilian population, just gunning people down and so forth, they were behaving like ISIS. And that's the mode that they're in. and they've turned Gaza into a massive terror base. And I think it has to be understood that if we want to move forward in peace, Hamas has to be defeated. And for me, it's very disappointing, though unfortunately not surprising, that so-called moderate Palestinians will justify Hamas instead of condemning them. If Britain can condemn Hamas, if nations across Europe can condemn Hamas, why can't Palestinians who profess to be moderate condemn Hamas? After all, Hamas is recognized by your government, by my government, by the United States, by Canada, by Japan, by the European Union, as a terrorist organization. That's what they are. And anyone who had any doubts about that could just see how they behaved on Saturday morning.
Yeah, I think you cannot get away from the fact that this is a terrorist organisation committing grotesque acts of terror, and we've just seen the most grotesque to date. Mark Ruggiero, thank you very much indeed for joining me. I appreciate it. Well, Uncensored next, the Piers Pack returns to debate the unfolding events in Israel and the rest of the day's news.
Good evening, I'm Piers Morgan, Uncensored in New York City.
Yeah.
King Piers and King Q.
I think there's only room for one king, man. You know what I'm saying?
He's mocked your weight, Trump.
Yeah, look at him. Fail. Stop working.
Just because they're skin folk don't mean they're kin folk.
Do you believe you can win this war?
You're making me cry again.
They're trying to force you out.
Yes, I feel betrayed.
Keep it award-winning. Mwah.
Lucy Letby will die behind bars.
And a senior doctor who first raised concerns about Letby wants NHS managers to be regulated.
We needed answers a lot sooner. This is, what, 7 years down the line? I mean, it's completely ludicrous.
He was clearly something of the face of the ward, so it was even more unthinkable.
If this nurse had misgendered somebody on a ward, she'd have been out the door.
When they first got together, there were press stories, weighty Katie.
That would make her a better Princess of Wales, because you're not just marrying the man, you're marrying the job.
That resonates with people. Ghislaine Maxwell agreed to be interviewed for the very first time.
I honestly wish I'd never met him.
The Conservative Party can certainly win the next election.
Can we?
Yes.
Labour
absolutely.
29 points ahead in the polls. Can we?
Did he say, yes, I have taken drugs and they bent the rules, or lied on the visa application form and therefore got it?
There needs to be an intervention around abortion laws.
Parliament is sovereign. Parliament can determine these things.
The rest of the world has watched on in sort of mounting horror as this story has unravelled. For you, it was incredibly personal.
The death toll from the Titanic tragedy has risen to 1,522, and may God rest their souls.
Let it roll.
If we stop producing oil, the knock-on effect is far larger than just CO2.
I nearly have empathy when I'm speaking to them. I know now you're probably going to boot me off the show after saying this now. About Meghan Markle. Some of them, they're easily led.
You can kiss my American ass. Thank you very much. Very nice of you.
Twitter, you sons of Can you please reinstate my account?
Yeah,
Thank you.
There's a threat that you'd be worried about.
So are you saying that you're being overwhelmed, that you're inundated? We are really working hard for you. We're just asking patients to be patient with us.
We're now in Barbie world. You weren't asked to give evidence to the grand jury.
I'm the only one that has been telling the truth.
You don't drink, never taken drugs. You're stinking rich. Should we be concerned, Prime Minister?
If it's on your mind, it's on TalkTV.
It's about you and your opinions.
If you're thinking about it,
we're talking about it.
It's all about me. That's a joke.
This is TalkTV.
Welcome back to Uncensored. My Packy with me, the socialist north of Grace Blakely, and TalkTV contributor Esther Cracker. Right, so Grace, this is horrendous. What happened was horrendous. The retribution is going to be horrendous. This spiral of violence continues. What do you make of this?
What I make of it is that the violence that we're seeing at the moment is, put in place and encouraged by the fact that there is so little knowledge and understanding of what is going on in Palestine and the crimes that are being committed there every day. If, like me, you know people in Palestine, you know journalists working in Palestine, you know human rights organisations working there, your newsfeed every day will be full of videos of Israeli troops harming civilians, killing children often. We know that 6,400 Palestinians have been killed since 2008 by IDF
Nothing
forces.
justifies the scale of this. This is ISIS-level terrorism.
What you're saying...
This is not just a revenge attack.
Piers, when you put to me a question like that, it's the equivalent of saying, there's a man who's in a house, he's got his whole family there, another guy comes in, kicks him out of his house, locks him in the cellar, kills his family, says, you're not coming out. All of his neighbours say, oh, yeah, you're right to keep him in there, and just ignore the situation. Suddenly the man comes up, busts out, says... I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff. I'm burning the house down. Lots of people die. And then the only way that you look at the situation is by saying, oh, let's condemn the man in the cellar. Yes, condemn the man in the cellar, but condemn the person who kicked him out as well.
You have to look at what is in the best interest of innocent Palestinians that are not reacting in this way. I'm not disputing the fact that obviously there is a lot wrong with the situation between Israel and Palestine. But the idea that, by murdering 700 Israeli citizens...
900 now.
Well, 900 now. You're inherently acting in the best interest of innocent Palestinians, who I've often said, I'm horrified by their plight. Over half of the population of Palestine is under the age of 25. An entire generation, this is all they've ever known.
The problem is Hamas are a nihilist terror organisation.
And then they want to kill
Palestinians.
Have been empowered by the collapse of the centre ground. And why has that happened? That has been aided and abetted by this astonishingly right-wing conservative government that we've seen in Israel.
But I can agree with
15,
that. And when I've interviewed Netanyahu, I put that to him. I can agree with that. There are lots of issues there. The social unrest in Israel because of their attempts to try and basically diminish the power of the Supreme Court.
The Israeli intelligence services are saying, we have been warning you, the Israeli government, that if you continue to allow Israeli settlers to murder Palestinians, this will cause a security threat. And now people are saying, this is
I just think it's chicken and the egg. I just don't think anyone on a day like this can start getting into the other stuff so quickly before you say, this is disgusting.
What makes me so sad, Piers, is that, of course it's disgusting, but there are so many abuses and violations and just horrible. An Israeli child shot in the back, running away from Israeli forces after he'd been throwing rocks. That literally just happened recently, documented by Human Rights Watch. Nowhere you see that in the media. Nowhere.
Because Iran clearly funded.
Well, Iran is clearly funding a lot of this.
Exactly. So where was their responsibility?
We've done a lot of the show on this issue. It's not going to go away. This will be raging now for weeks, months, I fear years. Let's just switch to something else. I just caught my eye on the news. David Walliams is now suing the makers of Britain's Got Talent for £10 million after he got fired for being caught on tape bad-mouthing contestants. But one line got my line. He said he has had active suicidal thoughts, but also that he's lost the ability to be funny. And when I read that, I was like, when did he have the ability to be funny?
Yeah, this is assuming he was
funny. I have never found him funny in my entire life. Esther, am I missing something?
Yeah, was he ever there for comedic relief? I didn't get the memo there, but I'm just wondering which of the powers that be at ITV did he really annoy to have that released? That's what I was thinking. Because
I don't think you'd be on the Simon Cowell Christmas card.
Exactly.
Has he ever made you laugh, Williams?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't really watched very much of his stuff. I just find it really annoying, this weaponisation of mental health discourse
I totally
that people
agree.
often do, especially celebrities when they are, they're dragged for exactly doing something
they
bad.
play it deliberately to get people on their side and to get other people off their back. We've got to leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed. Great to see you. I know you're going to Cornwall soon.
I am. I will come back every now and again.
You keep leaving
when
us.
I'm done surfing.
Uncensored next tonight as Beckham becomes the new #1 documentary on Netflix. I ask if it gives us a fresh insight into Posh and Becks, or is it just more cynical, cyclical myth-making by the undisputed king and queen of self-promotion? Welcome back. David Beckham's back with a new Netflix documentary. In it, we learn that Beckham was supposedly a once-in-a-generation footballer. Posh and Becks are described by Gary Neville with a straight face as the Charles and Diana of sport. And, of course, there's lots of moaning about the press, the fans and his various managers. So is it all a load of old golden balls? We're here to decide is the man who brought Beckham to LA Galaxy, Alexi Lalas, and podcaster James Barr. Right, Alexi, hit me with it then, because I've always found these two a bunch of self-promoting whiners who basically exploit every situation for personal financial gain. Discuss.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the documentary is going to change your opinion of them, but I think it kind of set out to humanize David and Victoria for that matter. And I think, in a sense, it does. I think it makes them a little bit more likable, whether you're seeing David putter around with his bees and his honey, or on barbecue, or his OCD when it comes to his clothes. But I also think that there's some misses. So it's entertainment. And I think ultimately you get a glimpse into what David Beckham is, but only the glimpse that he and Victoria and David Beckham, the machine, wants you to get.
Right, and James, that's my issue with it, is that this is a very sanitised thing. It's a bit like the Meghan and Harry Netflix one. What all we're getting is basically a PR job.
I mean, I love Meghan and Harry, and I think the documentary was pivotal. However,
this absolutely horrific, but go on.
This documentary is so boring. I mean, Rebecca Lewis isn't even named.
She's my second cousin, by the way.
Incredible. Really?
Yes, there's a bombshell for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, she's not named, so I imagine she feels this is quite disrespectful. She's one of the most interesting things about
dragged back
story.
into it, yeah.
Also, David Beckham really betrayed the LGBTQ+ community when he worked with Qatar. He last week said that it was actually a safe place for LGBT people, even though people are murdered for being gay there. So it does strike me as a bit shocking that he didn't sort of bring up how part of brand Beckham was built on.
Well, he wasn't
allyship.
really challenged about anything substantive. I mean, it was interesting to hear them talk, and I mean, Beckham was a good footballer, but Alexi, I've always felt that he's overrated in the pantheon of great players. He's a good player, but he was never a great player.
Yeah, but he was, arguably, and maybe still is, one of the most famous people on the planet. And I think that's another thing that the documentary doesn't really delve into is this brand. I find it as interesting as the actual player on the field. And to your point, look, we all know a titillating part is the affair and the alleged cheating and all that. And if you're going to bring it up, I don't know, but after watching it, I turned around and said, wait, that's it? Because they kind of just veered off into something else, and it never actually was addressed. I get it, it's personal. If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But if you're going to talk about it in the documentary, then there's got to be something definitive. And the intentional vagueness in that moment, I think, was stark and a missed opportunity, and one that really stands out.
Well, what is Beckham's reputation in America now, would you say?
Now, I think with the ownership that he has with Inter Miami and now bringing Messi, I think there's one of business. I think there's one of stardom. I also think that he, in the history of American soccer, his coming to Major League Soccer and to the United States, I do think that it's looked at as a seminal, and rightfully and fairly so, a seminal type of moment that changed the structure and the league. I don't think that he's looked at in the same way that, for example, Pele, when he came and played in the NSL, looked. And to your point about the player, Messi has always been about on the field and what he does on the field.
Beckham
David has been about everything on the field and off the field.
And James, Victoria Beckham and all this, how does she come over?
I mean, it's so unrelatable that she had her dad drive her to school in a Rolls Royce.
I know.
And the fact that she's trying to hide that is hilarious. Listen, I love Victoria Beckham. I've always loved the Spice Girls. I'm a Spice boy. I also think that's what's upsetting about this documentary. Like, it's more about him. I just don't really care. I want to see Victoria Beckham getting back to what she does best. And what she does best is pointing in the Spice Girls. So can we please get a reunion?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind a Spice Girls reunion. I wouldn't mind that, actually. I think it'd be quite fun. But they couldn't have any auto-tuning. They'd have to actually be heard singing as they actually sing. James, Alexi, good debate. Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Ginger Spice, baby. Ginger Spice.
That's it from me. Keep it uncensored. Good evening, I'm Piers Morgan, Uncensored in New York City.
King Piers and King Q. I think it's only room for one king, man. You know what I'm saying?
He's mocked your weight, Trump.
Yeah, look at him. Fail. Stop working.
Just because they're skin folk don't mean they're kin folk.
Do you believe you can win this war?
He's making me cry again.
They're trying to force you out. Yes, I feel betrayed. Keep it award-winning. Mwah.
Lucy Letby will die behind bars.
And a senior doctor who first raised concerns about Letby wants NHS managers to be regulated.
We needed answers a lot sooner. This is, what, 7 years down the line? I mean, it's completely ludicrous.
He was clearly something of the face of the ward, so it's even more unthinkable.
If this nurse had misgendered somebody on a ward, she'd have been out the door.
When they first got together, there were press stories, weighty Katie.
That would make her a better Princess of Wales, because you're not just marrying the man, you're marrying the job.
That resonates with people. Ghislaine Maxwell agreed to be interviewed for the very first time.
I honestly wish I'd never met him.
The Conservative Party can certainly win the next election.
Can we?
Yes.
Labour
absolutely.
29 points ahead in the polls. Can we?
Did he say, yes, I have taken drugs and they bent the rules, or lied on the visa application form and therefore got it?
There needs to be an intervention around abortion laws.
Parliament is sovereign. Parliament can determine these things.
The rest of the world has watched on in sort of mounting horror as this story has unravelled. For you, it was incredibly personal.
The death toll from the Titanic tragedy has risen to 1,522, and may God rest their souls.
Let it roll.
You know